Hey guys, it's Christian. For this video, I'm going to revisit an idea I had from a previous video, and that video was how Marvel Phase 4 should have been. I'm going to kind of try to do that format with this video. So for this one, I'm going to do how the DC Extended Universe could have been. As of this recording, the Flash movie is going to be coming out next week, and I know there's supposed to be rumors that it's supposed to kind of reboot the entire DC franchise. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of do my own kind of reimagining of the DC Universe. So what I plan to do is go through the first handful of DC movies and kind of give my brief review of the movie, and then go into my ideas of how it could have been. And I'm not going to go through every single DC movie, I'm just going to go through the first handful, because I know James Gunn's future movies are going to be called Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. So for this one, I kind of want to do my own kind of Chapter 1 and kind of give my critiques on them as if I was a story editor at Warner Brothers. And hopefully in an alternate universe, I could help the filmmakers start off on the right foot going forward with the DC universe. So with all that out of the way, let's jump in. So first up, we have Man of Steel. And for this one, I mostly enjoyed it. I think I enjoyed the first half more than the second half. I think once Zod comes back down to Earth and invades Smallville, and Superman and Zod can have their fight and everything, it just kind of goes off the rails for me. Because I know with this one, Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer kind of wanted to make Superman a little bit more serious, a little bit more grounded, which I totally appreciate. But I think they kind of went a little bit too dark, because I know like Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer were really inspired by the Dark Knight trilogy, and David S. Goyer was originally trying to have this version of Superman within the world of the Dark Knight trilogy, but Christopher Nolan really just wanted those three films to be self-contained and not necessarily have Superman in that one. So they decided to kind of just reboot Superman altogether with the approach that Christopher Nolan had for the Dark Knight trilogy. And I think that's totally fine, but I really think that Superman should be more of a positive character, especially how he is in the comic books. So to kind of just preview what I plan to do for the rest of this video, for my version of what the DC universe would be, it would be Man of Steel, the Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, the Flash, and then a Justice League movie. So we'll already kind of establish that Batman's already in this universe. So I know with Man of Steel, when they were first making that movie, they didn't really know if Batman was going to be in it. I know Zack Snyder was kind of dropping hints that there could be a Batman in this universe. During the climax where Superman and Zod are fighting, they go up into space and they kind of hit that satellite and it says Wayne Enterprises on it. So they kind of hint that there is a Batman in the universe, but they weren't really guaranteed that there was going to be one until Man of Steel was released, and for them hopefully became a box office success, and then they can kind of roll out the new DC movies. But in this version, if we already established that there's a Batman in this universe, then we can kind of work our way up to those, starting with Man of Steel. But anyway, back to the critique. So how I would reboot Superman is that I would just definitely make him more of a positive character, make him more hopeful, make him more inspiring to actually save humanity. So when you introduce Batman, you can kind of have the polar opposite, where you have the super light positive character and you have the super dark brooding character. So when you team him up in Justice League, you can kind of see those two butt heads. So I actually really like the approach that Zack Snyder and David S. Goyer did with the kind of non-linear storytelling, kind of like what Christopher Nolan did with Batman Begins. So I think that totally works. Everything that kind of explains the backstory of Clark Kent, I thought was really good. I thought the fact that Clark Kent is like an alien in this world and, doesn't quite fit in with the other kids and the other people of Smallville, I thought was great. And, all the mentoring that Jonathan Kent had for Clark Kent, just let him know that, he's special, that he has these powers for a reason, and that, he has to use these powers for good. And then eventually down the road, where Clark actually goes into that Kryptonian scout ship and then meets with the artificial intelligence version of Jor-El, that really inspires him to want to be the savior for humanity. And I think everything from getting to that point is great. And I think as far as just the changes and stuff, once Zod actually comes in the picture, Superman should really just be more of like that positive figure. He can still struggle with his powers. He can still struggle with, being the savior of humanity. He can still have that low point, all hope is lost moment of like not really knowing what to do. But I really feel like there should be more of like a philosophical argument between Superman and Zod, where Zod is really trying to conquer the world, because Krypton was destroyed, and he was kind of part of that uprising to save it in a way, and kind of like move his species of Kryptonians forward. And then Superman can kind of be in this kind of like ideological battle with him of like, no, Zod, we need to save humanity. We have these powers for a reason. We need to be the protectors of humanity. And that can kind of be like their argument throughout like kind of like the midpoint of the story. And then we can kind of get into like the crazy action stuff. Another criticism that Man of Steel has is that the action is very, very over the top, which I totally agree, especially when it kind of has that kind of like 9/11 imagery, which, it's just like not really the best approach you should have for these kind of superhero action movies. I think if you really emphasize Superman's human side, I think a mistake that Man of Steel had was that he wasn't like the typical Clark Kent, the Christopher Reeve version of Clark Kent in Superman. I think that would have been really cool if maybe like at the half-hour mark, he would have taken the job at the Daily Planet instead of at the end of the movie, and really saw humanity for like who they were, get to know Lois Lane a little bit more, because I know that was another criticism, is that the relationship between Lois Lane and Clark Kent / Superman just was very just dry. There wasn't really a lot of humanity to that relationship. So I think having more of like the romantic aspect involved would have been really cool, just so that Clark can see like who humans are from a ground level and kind of inspire him to want to save humanity when Zod actually attacks. Those are really like my main critiques of Man of Steel. Other than that, I think if they reduced the action and made Clark Kent / Superman just a little bit more of a three-dimensional character, I think that really could have worked for the movie. And I think to set up Justice League in the future, there could have been maybe like a post-credit scene of Clark Kent meeting with Amanda Waller, and Amanda Waller, inspiring him saying like, hey, you're a metahuman and we need people to save us from like threats like Zod, and we really want you whenever you're ready to be part of our Task Force X, which, you know, can be changed a little bit later on, Justice League program or whatever they want to call it. And then we can kind of go off from there. All right, and now we move on to the Batman. And for this version, it won't be the Matt Reeves version of Batman, because I know originally Ben Affleck was trying to do his own The Batman movie. And for that one, it was going to mostly take place within Arkham Asylum, which I thought could have been really cool, just because we haven't really seen Arkham Asylum a lot. I mean, we kind of got hints of it in the Christopher Nolan versions and then, you know, some other movies and TV shows here and there. But to have a full-length Batman movie within Arkham Asylum, I thought would be really cool. Because I know Ben Affleck was trying to adapt the Arkham Asylum comic series as well as Nightfall and the Arkham Asylum video game. And with that one, Deathstroke was going to have like a breakout within Arkham Asylum, and then he was using it to kind of tire out Batman so that he can finally break him, because Deathstroke was trying to get revenge on Batman due to the death of his son, and he was kind of blaming Batman for that happening. It would have introduced the Bat family, it would have introduced Robin, it would have introduced Batgirl, and it was supposed to hint more at the death of Robin that was kind of hinted at in Zack Snyder's version of Batman vs. Superman. And I think maybe like opening the film up with kind of like a brief origin story, kind of like how Zack Snyder did with Batman vs. Superman. Just start off with the death of Bruce Wayne's parents, and then inspiring Bruce Wayne to become Batman, falling into the well, and then having the bats raise him up a little bit. You know, maybe they could have taken the same approach that Christopher Nolan did with Batman Begins, having like the non-linear storytelling, kind of like with Man of Steel, where, you know, you kind of cut back and forth between, you know, the past and the present. Maybe every time Bruce Wayne fights another villain within Arkham Asylum, he could have a flashback to his origin of how he became the Batman. And I think for this version, having a Batman who's already established, someone who's already fought for like 10 plus years as Batman would have been great, so that when Superman and Batman finally meet in Justice League, that could be another motivation of why they butt heads. You have this ultimate powerful hero with Superman who can fly and, you know, has super strength and can shoot lasers out of his eyes, and, you know, who just became a hero maybe like 6 months ago or something, you know, is kind of more of like an irresponsible child or something with his powers. And you have Batman, who's kind of like the parent who has like the tenure as a superhero, who's like worked within Gotham stopping crime and everything, so that when those two like finally get together, like they can have like this kind of like ideological like argument. But anyway, that's more for the Justice League. I'll get to that in a second. But anyway, back to Batman. I think with that one, there's just like a lot of great opportunities to kind of just show like the darkness within the DC universe. Whereas with Man of Steel, that one was really more of like, you know, the positive light one, and then now you have like more of like the dark brooding one. I know Zack Snyder is a huge fan of Batman, and allowing like Ben Affleck to have just like a full-on Batman movie, just like that's dark and brooding and intense, would be really, really awesome. So that's kind of like my take on it. As far as like plotting and everything, I think kind of like what I was saying earlier, you know, just having Batman, you know, kind of go within the trenches of Arkham Asylum, battling all these different villains, trying to prevent this kind of breakout from happening, and then kind of cutting back to flashbacks of how he became the Batman, and then eventually resolving in kind of like a one-on-one battle with Batman and Deathstroke. Maybe there can also be flashbacks of Deathstroke to his past, you know, how he became Deathstroke, and then how, you know, these two characters kind of like, you know, cross paths, and then maybe it can just end with this big battle where Batman finally defeats Deathstroke. Like, he obviously won't kill him, because criticism that Batman vs. Superman had was that, you know, Batman kills, which is definitely against his ideology. I know in the original comic books, you know, Batman would kill. He was definitely more of like a vigilante, like a hard-nosed detective and everything. But then, you know, as the comic book series went on, they kind of try to give Batman more of like a moral code and have him not kill anybody, but, you know, maybe he'll just, you know, beat criminals to a pulp, just like on the cusp of death and everything, not quite kill them, but and then, you know, send them to Arkham Asylum or whatever that might be. So maybe he can like, you know, beat down Deathstroke to like the point of like almost killing him, and then, you know, he stops himself. Maybe Batgirl comes in and stops him, like Batman vs. Superman, where, you know, Batman's about to kill Superman, and then Lois Lane comes in and it's like, oh no, it's his mother's name, you know, Martha, and all that. But yeah, with this version, you know, this could really show the brutality of Batman, you know, really hard-nosed, brutal, really intense version. Because I know in Ben Affleck's version, he was going to have Deathstroke kind of kill off people who are close to Batman, maybe like members of the Bat family. You know, maybe Deathstroke can be the one who kills Jason Todd. You know, that would be like an adaptation of the Death in the Family storyline, you know, that can like set up Batman's kind of vengeance quest, so to speak. Maybe that'll make him more like motivated to be more intense, and then once he gets, you know, set up for the Justice League movie, he can kind of be more of like embrace that vigilante identity that people put on him, of kind of like going against like the establishment. You know, once this team is starting to form, like he can be like the Rogue One, not Star Wars, but with DC, and, you know, be the one that kind of makes this team separate into like their own factions and everything, you know, once like the conflict hits. But overall, I think that would be really cool. I think maybe having like a post-credit scene of Bruce Wayne actually meeting with Amanda Waller at the very end. Maybe this can be like the scene that was at the end of Suicide Squad, where Bruce Wayne and Amanda Waller are meeting for dinner, and Amanda Waller is telling Bruce Wayne about, you know, these metahumans and everything. Maybe she can tell him about Superman. You know, maybe this could take certain aspects from Batman versus Superman of, Batman's hatred towards Superman. Maybe, since Batman is very much like a ground level hero, and then he's suddenly seeing this superhero like fly, leap over tall buildings in one bound and, is faster than a locomotive. And then he's suddenly like, where's my place in the world? I'm just this kind of boots on the ground hero. And then you have this kind of like God, so to speak, saving the planet and everything. Where do I fit in? So maybe that can like start that conflict of like Amanda Waller seeing Batman of like, hey, I know you're like this ground level hero, but now we have these metahumans in the world now, and we need to really start to form a team. Another kind of layer to the conflict that Batman and Superman have. But maybe that can set up for a Batman vs Superman movie down the line, but definitely not in this context. That would need a lot more setup for that. And I think the Batman movie that we got with Matt Reeves is really great, but I think the version that Ben Affleck had would have been really, really cool, really dark, really intense, and really could have set the stage for the future DC movies of having differences in tone, so that once they all kind of come together in Justice League, all of them can really like butt heads with all the tones that they have. All right, now we move on to Wonder Woman, and I don't really have too many critiques with this one. I think out of all the DC Extended Universe movies that came out prior to that, have been kind of hit or miss. This is definitely the highest quality one out of all of them. I think because of the fact that it is pretty much self-contained, it explains the origin of Princess Diana of Themyscira and shows like her kind of rise up in the ranks. The fact that she's the daughter of Zeus, she's already like a god in a way, and the fact that she's special, the fact that all these other Amazonians of Themyscira are obviously very powerful, but she's like the most powerful because she's the daughter of a god. And apparently that was like changed. Like originally she was just another Amazonian, and then once like the new 52 came out, like they changed her origin story to make her the daughter of Zeus, kind of molded from clay from Hippolyta. It kind of gives her more to relate to with Superman, because Superman is really like a god among humans. So then once Diana actually goes into the real world after meeting Steve Trevor, I think that's really good as well. And I really like the fish out of water aspect to it, where clearly she really stands out from the rest of the people like within London. She's like walking around with her sword and her shield, and Steve Trevor is kind of like, okay, let's just put the sword down, let's give you some normal clothes and all that. She's pointing out all like flaws with humanity in an innocent way. I know Patty Jenkins was really inspired by Richard Donner's version of Superman, where he's very much like that fish out of water character. As he's Clark Kent, he's like the goofy Clark Kent, and then when he's Superman, he's like all powerful and everything. I think what's really great about this movie is just like the earnestness it has. There's no like cynicism with Diana. She's very just what you see is what you get. It's really like the other humans around her who are more like two-faced and everything. Well, not Harvey Two-Faced, but like got multiple aspects to the personality. I think another theme in this movie is like the concept of duality, where you think like one person is one way, but they're really not. When it comes to like the villains and everything, it's kind of set up that this one general in the German army is supposed to be Ares, who's supposed to be, the god of war, but it really turns out, he's just a normal guy. And then the guy who you think is supposed to be the ally for America and London and everything is actually Ares, and they have their big battle at the end, which I think was like a downside of the movie, which I think it would have been great if, they just kind of cut the whole Ares battle scene out of the movie, which Patty Jenkins was wanting. Like she was just wanting to have Diana go against the brutality of humanity and be like that symbol of peace, and you didn't really have to have the whole kind of Ares reveal and then have them battle. And she could have just had like her earnestness kind of inspire the war to end, be that symbol of peace. But I know the studio was trying to shoehorn Ares into that movie and to have that whole big battle at the end, which is what it is. But I think in this version, obviously you would cut that out, and then maybe at the beginning where Hippolyta is talking with Diana about the whole backstory of the wars with the gods, maybe you can introduce Steppenwolf in that way. I think one of the downsides about the Justice League version is that there's not really like a personal connection with the Justice League members to Steppenwolf. So I think having maybe that connection right away within the Wonder Woman movie of setting up Steppenwolf would be really good as well. I also think setting up the mother box as well, maybe when Hippolyta is showing Diana around the mascara, you can set up like, hey, here's like the vault with the mother box, and then Diana can be like, wait, what's that? And then maybe she can explain the whole backstory. I know in the Justice League version, the 2070 version, there's two different versions of the backstory, where one version there's Steppenwolf who's after the three mother boxes for the Unity, and then the other version is Darkseid going after the mother boxes. In my personal opinion, I think the Snyder Cut is obviously the superior version, so I think having Darkseid go after the mother box and maybe having Steppenwolf be his henchman on the ground during that battle trying to go after them would be really cool to just set up that in advance. So it can just be like a little throwaway line about, mother boxes, Darkseid, Steppenwolf, and then they can kind of get on with the story. And then once we get to my version of what Justice League would be, everything would all be set up beforehand, so we don't really have to have that whole 5-10 minutes of backstory. It can just already be up to date with everything. But yeah, that's really all the critiques I have for the Wonder Woman movie. Overall, I think it's a very good movie. I think in order to set up the Justice League movie, I really like that aspect of we kind of begin and end with Diana in present day. She's kind of like works at that kind of antique museum, and and she kind of gets that email from Bruce Wayne of like the picture of her with Steve Trevor and then the other soldiers that she was with in the movie. Just taking that aspect from Batman vs Superman and the actual version of Wonder Woman in this version will be really good, just to kind of set that up a little bit, because I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think with Batman vs Superman, the mistake that they had was that they kind of just set up way too many things at once. You have to introduce Batman and Wonder Woman and set up Justice League and then set up Darkseid and Lex Luthor and all this stuff, and I think they were trying to like play catch up with Marvel instead of having like all these characters set up previously and then having them all in their own movie together, which is like, okay, let's just have Man of Steel and then we'll just go Batman vs Superman, but it's not really a Batman vs Superman movie, it's really like a Dawn of Justice movie. And especially since it's just the second movie, it's like, okay, you guys are doing way too much, way too fast. Let's establish these characters in advance first and then have them all together. But anyway, that's why we're here, to kind of talk about what it could have been. But anyway, I think having those bookends would be really cool. We're at the beginning, Diana's looking at that photo of her with Steve Trevor and the other soldiers, and that kind of takes it into the story. And we kind of come back to present day, and then she's typing like, thank you, Bruce Wayne, for sending me this photo and everything. This is really inspiring. And then maybe Bruce Wayne can send her the files of like, here's the other metahumans that we've discovered. I broke into LexCorp and I got these secret files, and I know that you're a metahuman too, and we're going to team together and we need you for it. So maybe that can kind of end with kind of like a conflicted look on Diana's face, like, oh, do I really want to come back into society as Wonder Woman, or do I want to just stay as Diana Prince and just be an antique stealer and everything? So I think that would have been really, really cool if they did that and not kind of ruin the continuity by having Wonder Woman 1984 where she kind of comes back into society, but have really this be, you know, the spark that really gets her back into society. All right, now we move on to Aquaman, and this is another one that I think was actually a really good movie, what they did with it. And I think like the only aspect of it is that there's like a couple of things. I think one is that I guess kind of like the variations in tone. It's like on one hand, it's like a very, you know, serious superhero origin story. And on the other hand, it's kind of like this fun, lighthearted kind of squashbuckler storyline. I guess they don't necessarily blend together. You know, sometimes it does, but sometimes it's like, okay, you kind of need to choose a tone here. Like, which one do you want to be? And I think with Aquaman, just trying to make him more of like a serious superhero would be really cool, just because previously, you know, had the blonde hair and like the orange suit and like the green underpants and everything, and everyone would kind of make fun of him, you know, based on like Super Friends, and no one would really take him seriously like in pop culture and like stand-up comedy acts and everything. You know, it's like, oh, Aquaman, Waterman, you know, all this stuff. So I think one of the things they actually did right was that they casted Jason Momoa as Aquaman. You know, previously he was on Game of Thrones, you know, as one of the Dothraki, and you know, obviously he's a very intimidating presence. So I think having him casted as Arthur Curry / Aquaman was a really good choice. And I think, you know, he could still have like funny aspects and stuff to him, but I think really like having him be, you know, dark and serious would be best for his character, just because he has that pretty much tragic backstory of like, you know, being half Atlantean, half human, you know, that whole conflict. And kind of like how Superman and Wonder Woman are very much fish out of water. Well, I guess that, you know, he technically is like a fish out of water, you know, since he can talk to fish and all that, which, you know, they joke about in like Justice League and everything. But anyway, just have that conflict of like, you know, where do I belong? And I think another aspect is obviously have this movie take place before Justice League, because I know with the actual version of Aquaman, it takes place after Justice League. I don't think it really works in that aspect, because, you know, if you have Aquaman on this team with the Justice League, wouldn't you be inspired to be a hero? Would you not want to be, you know, reluctant and everything, kind of like what they have in the actual DC Extended Universe version of Arthur Curry / Aquaman? You know, after, you know, saving the world from Steppenwolf and the mother boxes and the Unity and stuff like that, like why is he still, you know, going to bars and, you know, getting drunk and getting into fights with people, or I guess taking selfies with, you know, biker characters and stuff like that? It's like, wouldn't you want to stay a hero? So I know that was like one of the criticisms, is that, you know, Aquaman doesn't really address the events of Justice League, even though it takes place after Justice League. So yeah, with this version, you know, you can go full out with Arthur Curry, you know, being that conflicted hero, knowing about the backstory of his mother being sent to the trench and, you know, being raised as the lighthouse keeper, being, you know, the odd man out, going to aquariums and talking to fish and, you know, the bullies making fun of him and all that stuff. That would very much mirror Clark Kent being raised by the humans, being that odd man out of having all these powers that he doesn't really understand, and, you know, not really fitting in with the rest of his classmates and the town in general. So I think that would be another relatable aspect once we get to Justice League, where Clark Kent meets Arthur Curry, and, you know, they can kind of bond over that aspect of, you know, being aliens in a way and, you know, not really fitting in. So that could be cool, but that's really more for, you know, Justice League. Once again, I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, back to Aquaman, just having Arthur Curry be that reluctant hero, being made fun of by, you know, society, being conflicted of trying to be like the crown prince of Atlantis, you know, this whole uprising of the Ocean Master Orn and trying to unite the 7 kingdoms of the ocean to go against the surface world and all that. So I think that could be a really cool arc for his character, both Volko and Mara being like his allies, his mentors and everything, and having that kind of like training aspect and all that. You know, once, you know, that tidal wave comes in that Orin sends to the surface world, which almost kills Arthur's dad. That can be kind of like the call to adventure, where beforehand, Vulko and Mera are saying, you have to come back to Atlantis, you have to be the rightful king of Atlantis and stop Orin from uniting the seven kingdoms and going against the surface world and everything. He can be reluctant. Tideway can come in, and that can be like a spark to, actually become the hero that he has to be. And then we can kind of go into what the actual movie was, the whole trying to find like the trident and that globe-trotting adventure, kind of like Indiana Jones or The Mummy or National Treasure, where you have to kind of find all these clues. I think maybe if they kind of reduce the humor down just a little bit, they can still have humor and stuff, but not really be as, campy and stuff. Because I know after everything went down with Batman vs Superman and like the criticisms that got from like being so dark, DC was trying to reinvent themselves in a way by having more humor. So, Wonder Woman's a little bit more positive, which totally fits that character, so that was fine. Have Aquaman be a little bit more humorous and funny, which I thought kind of worked during some aspects, but some of them was like, okay, come on, this is a little too cheesy here. Let's like have some seriousness and stuff like that, especially for a character like Aquaman, where the name itself is already like laugh-inducing. So to have something that's a little bit more serious, a little more grounded, where you kind of watch it like, oh shoot, okay, like this guy, I don't want to mess with him. So yeah, I think like the same beats can play out from the original Aquaman movie, just have the humor be reduced a little bit, maybe not have the action be so over the top. We can kind of get to the end where Arthur takes up the trident, becomes Aquaman, takes his rightful place on the throne of Atlantis. Orin gets arrested and all that stuff. He kind of ends the conflict between the surface world and the seven kingdoms. And lastly, for Aquaman, I think setting up the mother box in advance, like maybe before, the end credits, Arthur could walk into the chamber with the mother box and Vulko can explain, the whole backstory of like, hey, we're protecting these mother boxes from a guy named Steppenwolf who works for Darkseid. And, that can be, a callback to Wonder Woman, where, Diana is being taught about the mother box from Hippolyta, and, that can set up future events for Justice League and everything. And, it can just be like, hey, as King of Atlantis, you really need to protect this mother box because we don't want, Steppenwolf to come back and, create the unity and create a boom tube to Darkseid from Apocalypse to, take over the world and everything. That can be a sworn duty of Arthur Curry to protect this mother box from the world ending and everything. And, maybe we can set up Justice League by having like a post-credit scene of Bruce Wayne meeting up with Thomas Curry, because maybe you can have a conversation with him. I know there's like a metahuman, like an Aquaman, and he can tell his father that they're forming a team that they need to protect humanity with. And, obviously Arthur wouldn't be in the town because, he's in Atlantis right now, being the king and all that stuff. And, trying to set up events for later on where he's trying to unite the seven kingdoms from like other factions who are trying to take over the surface world. But other than that, I thought, Aquaman was a pretty good movie. Like I said before, if they kind of reduced the humor down a little bit, made it a little bit more serious, maybe not have the action be so over the top. Now we move on to The Flash. And I know as of this recording, the Flash movie hasn't come out, but I know with that movie, it's supposed to kind of be kind of like a reboot of the DC franchise and, kind of be like a greatest hits of showing Michael Keaton's version of Batman, having Michael Shannon as Zod come back, introducing Supergirl, having like a Flashpoint storyline, to reboot. The entire DC franchise is good too. But for this version, I think it would be good to have kind of like a Flash origin story, kind of like what they did with the CW version of Flash with Grant Gustin. I think with this movie, you can start off with the whole like classic opening scene of Barry Allen coming into his parents' house and seeing his mother murdered. That can kind of set up his father being arrested and then inspire Barry to, become a forensic scientist, try to figure out who killed his mother and all that. Because I know it looked like his father murdered her, but obviously, Barry knows the truth. So I guess you can have like two different aspects. Because I know like there's one aspect where, you have kind of like the reverse Flash, who's kind of like, at least in the TV show, who's in the house, speeding around and everything, and is the one who supposedly killed his mother. Or you can have another aspect with the Flashpoint animated version where it's just, a robber just broke into the house and killed her. So I think either way, how you ever want to set up would be really cool. I think maybe kind of just leaning more into it was just like a random robber who just broke into the house and killed her and everything, got away. And then maybe the dad came in and then, had her in his arms and, was crying over her. Barry walks in and is, all freaked out, and then kind of go from there where Barry's father is arrested and then Barry is kind of inspired to become that forensic scientist to figure out who murdered his mother and prevent other murders from happening. And I think that could really relate to Batman because, obviously Batman's parents were killed by a robber, and, that can help Barry and Bruce relate to each other because they had a parent who was killed, and, that kind of inspired them to become a hero. And I think with this film, it can really draw on aspects from the CW version of The Flash with Barry's origin story. Maybe this can set up Star Labs, and in this version, we can set up Victor Stone as Cyborg and, set up Silas Stone and, how he works for Star Labs, which in the Snyder Cut, we see Silas Stone working with the mother boxes. They can really set up Justice League. And I think it would be really cool to set up Victor Stone as Cyborg. Maybe we can see his whole backstory within the Flash movie. Maybe Barry Allen and Victor Stone can be kind of, like enemies series, Barry Allen is kind of like the nerdy kid, and then maybe like Victor Stone is kind of like the bully and stuff. Like maybe they go to the same college or something. I know they're in different cities and stuff. At least in the movies, Barry Allen's in Central City, and then at least in the movie version, Victor Stone's in Gotham. But maybe they go to the same university. Maybe they're all in Central City, and maybe they start off as enemies, and then maybe Silas Stone is like at work, and then he's working on this experiment that goes wrong, and then explodes, and then maybe like the static from the explosion starts to create all these different metahumans within Central City. Either you can go at that aspect, or maybe it just kills off a bunch of people, and then with a certain few people it activates like the metahuman gene within people, so it can affect Barry Allen. He can still get struck by lightning. Maybe it happens during a thunderstorm, kind of like how it does in the CW version, where like there's this big explosion, and then the lightning comes down, shocks Barry. That kind of activates like the metahuman gene within him and make him like super speed and like heal fast. And then on the flip side, Victor Stone could be like kind of like how they explained in the Snyder Cut. He can be in the car with his mom. They get into a car accident, and after the whole accident at Star Labs, Silas Stone can bring Victor into the lab and like use like the technology that he had from the mother box that he found. That kind of gets set up in Batman vs Superman, but in this movie it gets set up here in the Flash movie, and all the parts kind of like form on Cyborg. He's part human, part metabox, technology, so he's able to communicate with it. So I can set up future events in Justice League, and then from there we can kind of get the whole kind of like classic story that's in the Flash series, where Silas Stone can kind of be like a mentor for Barry. Maybe there can kind of be like a jealousy aspect, where on one hand, Victor Stone is more just like a cyborg who's like kind of discovering his kind of mechanical powers, flight and shooting lasers and having like the extra arms and stuff like that, where he sees himself more of like a monster, whereas Barry, physically, he still looks the same. He just has super speed, healing and all that stuff. So maybe Silas can be kind of like a mentor figure for Barry once he figures out that the metahuman gene was activated in him. So like the first half of the movie can kind of be like his training of both Flash and Cyborg, and then Flash and Cyborg can kind of like butt heads, because previously they were kind of enemies. They were kind of like bully and the nerdy kid, and now they kind of have to work together and kind of be kind of like these rising heroes in a way, kind of discover their powers due to this accident that Silas caused. And maybe like the midway point can kind of be once Barry kind of figures out his powers, he can go back into the past, kind of try to prevent his mother's murder. Maybe he discovers the Speed Force along the way. Maybe Silas can talk to him about it. And it's like, hey, you shouldn't be using this. You shouldn't be changing aspects of reality and all this stuff. And then Barry's kind of like, that reluctant kid. It's like, okay, maybe there can just be like an event that kind of inspires Barry to go back in time, prevent it all from happening. Maybe he can meet with his dad, and maybe there can be like a trial or something that causes his dad to be put away for life without any chance of like parole, and that really kind of inspires Barry to like, okay, I really need to just go back in time, prevent all this from happening. So he kind of goes against Silas and Victor, goes back in time, tries to prevent the murder. He comes back and then sees everything's been changed. Now that we already established that there's Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman in this universe, we can have the classic Flashpoint storyline of Aquaman and Wonder Woman battling each other. Cyborg is now like the leader of the Justice League. Thomas Wayne is now Batman, and Bruce Wayne was killed, and then Superman was taken away from the government, and was like all skinny and stuff, because he hasn't seen sunlight. So Barry sees that by going back in time, he like ruined everything. Instead of like partnering with Thomas Wayne, he can partner with Victor Stone and Silas Stone, and kind of like get his powers back again. The whole classic Flashpoint storyline. Prevent all the conflict from happening, and then kind of come back to the present and realize, okay, now I need to be responsible with my powers. I can't just use the Speed Force for anything, but this can set up the fact that he can use the Speed Force, which will set up events for Justice League where he uses the Speed Force to save humanity once the mother boxes are combined. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I think that would have been really cool if they did that for the Flash movie, have it be more of like an origin story instead of kind of like a reboot of the franchise. And this could set up the future of the Justice League, especially with the whole kind of mother box aspect of it. Maybe Amanda Waller can meet with Silas Stone and talks about, you activated the mother box, we're gonna have to find the other mother boxes to prevent this unity and everything. Maybe she talks to Wonder Woman about it, and she kind of warns her that we can't be tampering with these mother boxes, and that we need to prevent the unity from happening, prevent the boom tube from opening and having Darkseid invade humanity. So that can be kind of like a little warning for future stories. All right, and then to kind of wrap all this up, we'll get into Justice League. And obviously the Justice League version that we got, the 2017, was very much not what a lot of people wanted. It got really criticized for, characters, dialogue, some of the action sequences, visual effects, the weak villain. I know some people liked it, some people liked the lighter tone, but as far as like, the hardcore DC fans, fans, who wanted to see kind of like harder Justice League movie, the whole kind of hashtag release the Snyder Cut campaign that happened. Eventually we got the Snyder Cut, which was definitely light years beyond what the 2017 version of Justice League was, but I know there were like many circumstances that happened. Zack Snyder was dealing with the death of his daughter, and he wasn't able to come in and, finish post-production, and then we had Joss Whedon come in and make it the Justice League version, put all of his cheesy humor and take out all these action scenes and all the kind of like the dark aspects of it, because like when it was being made, it was supposed to be like two different movies, Justice League Part 1, Justice League Part 2, and then once we get the Snyder Cut, it's like a 4-hour version, so it's like two 2-hour movies. And obviously you can't release a 4-hour version, so the studio was really like, okay, we need to lighten up the tone because we have to make it more like Marvel, and obviously we can't release a 4-hour cut in theater, so just make it 2 hours. So Joss Whedon came in post-production, filmed all these different pickups, cut out half the movie, half the things that made the Snyder Cut great, and kind of injected it with his own little bits and pieces of humor, which is like against what was set up with Snyder's version. But anyway, that's why we're here, to have kind of like the alternate universe version. So I think obviously if we were to redo Justice League, it would probably have to be the Snyder version, but obviously cut down maybe to like 2.5 hours or something. But certain aspects would have to be changed due to the fact that all these characters are set up previously, and then now they're finally coming together in a Justice League movie, as opposed to Batman vs Superman, where Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman were in that movie, and then Superman is killed off by Doomsday, and then his cry is what activates some other boxes. But for this version, I think the inciting incident should be Steppenwolf trying to prove himself to Darkseid that he's still strong and that he's still loyal, which they set up in the Snyder Cut, which I thought was great. Kind of give him a motivating factor of like, why is he trying to find these mother boxes? Why is he trying to create the unity? Why is he trying to open up a portal to Apocalypse so that Darkseid can take over humanity and have like Desaad be the mediator between Steppenwolf and Darkseid, which they have in the Snyder Cut, which is great. But I think what really should spark the rest of the story is that maybe Silas Stone is at Star Labs and he's messing with the mother boxes, and you have Amanda Waller, and maybe like you can introduce maybe like Rick Flag and maybe like Amelia Harcourt or something as the kind of like supervisors of like, okay, we're just trying to study the mother boxes, we're not trying to activate it. But Silas, being Silas, goes a little bit too far, kind of like his Miles Dyson character in the Terminator movies. The mother box gets activated, a portal gets open, and then Steppenwolf comes out of the portal, wipes out nearly all the characters in Star Labs, maybe wipes out Silas Stone, and that kind of motivates Victor Stone and Amanda Waller to really get the team together. Steppenwolf takes the mother box and teleports himself out, and that's what kind of really sets the stage of like getting all these characters together. So you have maybe like Amanda Waller can be like recruiting Wonder Woman, Rick Flag can be recruiting the Flash, they reach out to Bruce Wayne can reach out to Arthur Curry and kind of get him involved in the story, and then finally Superman can like swoop in at the very end of it once they find out that Steppenwolf has one of the mother boxes, and then the next one he can go after is maybe the one in Atlantis. So that kind of like motivates Arthur Curry to get involved into the action. Maybe that can be like the first conflict that the Justice League kind of have to come together to prevent, and then at the very end kind of show off everybody's powers, show off how like Wonder Woman and Batman and Flash and Cyborg kind of work together. Maybe Batman and Cyborg can be like in the air over the ocean waiting for Steppenwolf to come out, while like Aquaman is like under the water, maybe creates like an air bubble with Wonder Woman, and like they're like fighting with him, and maybe throw in Mera just for good measure. But obviously Steppenwolf gets some other box and gets away, and maybe before he gets away, Superman can swoop in, they can have their whole fight, and then that can create the conflict between the Justice League members. It's like, you're this all-powerful superhero, like why can you prevent Steppenwolf from getting the mother box? So that can kind of start this kind of disunity between the Justice League. They don't really trust each other, they don't really work well together, they're used to fighting for themselves, and then as the story goes on, they really have to figure out like, okay, where's the next mother box? It's in the mascara. Maybe that can be like a conflict for Wonder Woman of like, she doesn't really want to return because she wasn't allowed to return after she left in the Wonder Woman movie, so that can be her whole conflict. But maybe Batman or Amanda Waller can like inspire her to kind of get back into the fight and everything. So they go to the mascara, Steppenwolf invades and defeats like all the Amazonians, the Justice League finally arrives, they like have a big battle with Steppenwolf, but maybe he kills off Hippolyta, and that really sparks Wonder Woman. But just before she's about to give like the killing blow, he opens up a portal, gets away. So he has all three mother boxes, and he can kind of go to that abandoned Russian facility with all the nuclear fallout and cause the unity, and the portal begins to open up. The Justice League are like in their lowest point, they don't really know what to do, and then they really have to figure out like, we really need to be united because obviously Darkseid is very powerful, and they really need to kind of get over their conflict and really work as a team this time around. So the third act can be them going to that abandoned Russian facility, finally battling Darkseid just before the mother boxes are about to converge. Superman and Victor Stone are trying to like pull it apart, but they're too late. Everything explodes, humanity's about to be destroyed forever. The portal's about to open, Darkseid's about to walk walk in, but then Barry, finally uses the Speed Force, reverses time, kind of like how he does in the Snyder Cut, puts his hands on Victor. Victor's like brought back to life. Cut to his whole scene of meeting with his family, and you can have like another last scene between him and his father. His father saying that he's proud of him, his mother saying he's proud of him, and then that inspires Cyborg to work with Superman to like pull apart the mother boxes, prevent the portal from opening. Wonder Woman can have her big battle with Steppenwolf, like in the Snyder Cut, cut off his head, send it into the portal, with Darkseid staring at it just before the portal's about to close up, and that really inspires Darkseid and Desaad to build up their army of like parademons and all that to, find another way to destroy humanity. The Justice League is finally united. They work together as a team. They have that cool shot of like all the 6 members smiling at each other, Cyborg and Flash giving fist bumps to each other and all that, and Superman and Batman, finally respecting each other, Diana and Arthur Curry being, the heroes that they're always meant to be. Then you can kind of end it with the heroes kind of going their separate ways, but having in the back of their mind, if there's ever a big conflict, if there's trouble, you know who to call. Little Teen Titans reference. And then maybe you can have like a post-credit scene of like Darkseid and Desaad trying to come up with backup plans to destroy humanity and all that. But yeah, those are all my ideas for how the DC Extended Universe could have been. Let me know what aspects you'd have changed about the DC Universe in the comments below. Also, let me know what DC Extended Universe movie is your favorite. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.